there, welcome back to a few quickie shows. Really, we saw my video I did yesterday about anxiety. You know what I'm doing this week. I wasn't sure whether to do any more shows this week or not. I thought I'd do some, but there's going to be without any background, without any clever backing stuff. It's just going to be me talking. So there we go. So there's going to be 3, as there's going to be from now on. It's going to be 3 rather than 5. So, but there might be more within each video though, so it's not just maybe one film. So that's going to be the big difference. And also, I'm going to do a thing where I start off non-spoiler and I'll go to spoiler. You know, in this case, of these videos I'm going to cover, at least I'm going to cover today, that's not really necessary because they're either a new film, so I'm not going to spoil anything anyway, or they're older films, and they're not films that really need to worry about spoiling them because they're like a kung fu movie, so it's not relevant for this video anyway. But in the future, that's the plan I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with the non-spoiler section, then I'll go to the spoiler section. I'll give you a kind of point where you can stop if you haven't seen the film. That'll probably just make it easier if I'm doing a video about something that a lot of people haven't seen, but I can give you an idea of what to expect. Then you can just stop at a certain point and say, okay, I'm not going any further, I haven't seen the film. So that's the kind of way I'm going to reorganise my videos slightly. I just thought it'd be easier because sometimes like there's films I put up, I'm sure a lot of people just wouldn't watch the videos if they haven't seen the films, and it's like I put up something about Pig and I put up something about PTU and Nine Soul, and I don't think many people watched them because they probably thought, well, he's going to spoil them, and I didn't. But it's that kind of thing. Is like I get quite confused with certain films that people think I'm just going to spoil them and have to wait till I see the film before I can watch this video. So I'm just changing that up a little bit so that there's less of a problem there, really. So today I'm going to talk about Prisoners of the Ghostland, the new Sion Sono film, as well as a bunch of films I've watched that are Shaw Brothers films and Zoo Warriors. So that's quite a lot of films. I mean, the idea now is going to be Monday's going to be like Asian films, unless I haven't watched any of those. So, but usually the idea is my aim is for Monday to do like something from Asia, Tuesday to do something from the West, and Thursday to do something that's either what the hell is this, or his debuts, or something like that. Something that's a more specialist thing, really. So it can go either way, and maybe a bit silly, maybe a bit cheesy. So it's just trying to spread out the films a bit more, so that I'm not doing a bunch of videos about films maybe that are maybe not strong enough for individual video, which I have done in the past a lot. But sometimes I put videos up and it's like, well, that might have been worked better within a section of other films at the same time. So I'm just trying to make it easier for people to see the videos and not worry about spoilers, or just try and put up a video that might be not strong enough on its own. So I just try to change it around a bit as well, just to keep me interested too. So I'll start off with Prisoners of the Ghostland. Because this is a new film which has come out, there's going to be no spoilers at all. It's not going to be an in-depth look at it either, because it's just out, and it's a kind of film you can't really go too in-depth with so early in its release. I think you need to watch a few more times. And it is, because what Sion Sono does when he's doing a film that's, well, kind of taking on genre, like something like Vampire Hotel Tokyo, or Tokyo Vampire Hotel, or something like that, where it takes a kind of basic genre, like a vampire story, or here's like a post-apocalyptic story. It takes what's the basic foundations of it and then makes it strange. And that's sometimes puts people off, because I've seen reviews of this film saying visually it's great, the atmosphere is great, but the script's kind of rubbish. I don't think it's true. I think the script is very basic. And I think the script was chosen with Sono because it was basic. I don't think he was trying to choose a script that had lots of layers in its setup He's looking for the most basic thing. I mean, this is kind of like a post-apocalyptic movie, but it's tied to like the kind of genre of a lone hero sent out on a job to bring someone back. The person he's bringing back doesn't want to go back, and the person that has to take this person back to is corrupt and has to be taken down at the end. It's an old genre thing. It's a western. It's a samurai movie. So many films have done this particular story. I mean, even John Carpenter took that idea and made Escape from New York. And this film has its nods to Escape from New York, but it also has its nods to all these other genres of the past. It's a story it's basic as time. It's just one of those ones that's always been told through westerns, through other stories before that. It's a genre type of story, and Sono just breaks it down to its most basic level, which I think frustrates people because they think he was going to do something clever and, you know, really subversive, when he was just doing something that was taking something basic and tweaking it in his visual way. Because this is his first English language film, we didn't want to go too far first time round. We didn't want to scare people off and make something really weird, like a lot of the films he makes in Japan, which are strange, like Love Exposure or Why Don't We Play in Hell, or Strange Circus. I think he was trying to avoid doing that straight away. So I think everyone's watching this thinking, it's a bit normal for him. But it's like, if you think that, he just made Red Post in Exeter Street, which is an amazing film and one of his best films, and it is pure Sion Sono. So there's been 2 films recently released by Sion Sono, and one of them's pure Sion Sono set in Japan, and one of them's a more conventional narrative, but it stars Nicolas Cage, and it allows all the actors to go over the top. So he's mixing it up. And I've got to say, I thought Prisoners of the Ghostland was great. I adored it. I'm gonna look forward to watching it again. But compared to Red Post, it's lesser Sono. I mean, compared to a lot of Sono films, it is definitely in the lower half of Sono's filmography of recent years. But it's still great. You know, because Sono's it's got a really good track record at the moment. He's really knocking them out. Even his strange, eccentric things, the ones that probably at the lower level are still worth watching. Still very watchable films. They're still better than a lot of other directors are doing at their peak, because he's an interesting director. But this one is kind of strange and weird. And you've got Nicolas Cage with all these bombs all over him because he's not allowed to escape, because he's a criminal who went into a crime spree where his partner went mad and started shooting people, and now he has to, he's been a long-term prisoner now because this person has escaped to Ghostland, which is this area outside of town where people are terrified to go. This girl has escaped there with her friends to try and escape from her crazy grandfather, who's not really a grandfather. He's this abusive guy who's just played by Bill Moseley. You've seen in lots of films if you like genre films. He was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which this very much feels like. Where Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 with Tobe Hooper, where he was taking a very basic concept of a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then making it into this weird comedy where the pacing isn't that important and the acting can be over the top and it doesn't matter. This film has that same feel to it, so it's perfect that he was cast as a villain. And Nicolas Cage is going way over the top as usual. And he gets lots of injuries that he would kill him normally, but Nicolas Cage knows he's in basically an opera, and he just swings the fences with confidence that he's in a Sion Sono movie. And you have lots of really cool sequences in the Ghostland. The Ghostland, as soon as you go into Ghostland, it gets strange. It gets pure Sion Sono. All the supporting actors are odd and every person, even if they're an extra, is trying to steal this film. So if you prefer just having a few actors maybe above the top, but the rest are calm, this is not the film for you. Everybody in this film's trying to steal it. Even if someone's walking past the camera, they're trying to steal the film. You know. And it's great because it's this world that's strange, it's gone completely mad, and everyone was directed to try and steal the film. And I'm not even going to say what happens in the Ghostland. The Ghostland is something you just enjoy. It's crazy. There's some wonderfully haunting stuff in it. There's some wonderfully weird stuff in it. And there are interesting developments. Because it is a story ultimately. Well, there's lots of weird stuff. It's a story of people trying to make sense of their lives. So there is a dramatic element below the surface. Because Sono always has that. Maybe it's just not as developed as some of his other films, but it is there. And it is enjoyable. And it does tie into the Ghostland. It ties into the villains and everything else. Everything works the way it should. But because Sono's doing it, it gives a weird feel to it that's just strange and odd and wonderful. So this is one of the films of the year for me. But it is one film you should go in and not knowing that much about. Like, I'm just trying to avoid giving you the spoiling stuff. There's tons of stuff I'd like to talk about, but it's like you just try and see this for yourself. I might make a video on this in a while. It's a spoiler version, but who knows if I will or not. But this is something special. This is really. It's even it's a minor Sono film, but it does deliver. There's some really haunting moments and really strange character beats that will stick with you in a way that a slicker movie never could. So, yeah, definitely go and see this film. It is just wonderful. Okay, now that's Prisoner of the Ghostland, or Prisoners of the Ghostland. I can never get the title right. So now I'm going to go to Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain. Now this is a Seo Hark movie. I'm never very good at Seo Hark. I'm terrible at pronouncing his first name. I just am. He's produced a lot of stuff like John Woo and things like that, and he's directed a lot of films. His career's gone up and down over the years. This is one of his early. This is his first big hit, and it is a wonderfully strange film. But it is something you really got to pay attention to. Even though it's a very simple plot, it does feel a lot like Prisoners of the Ghostland, actually, because it's not caring that much about Western sensibilities. It's like, it is extreme. It does go 100 miles an hour throughout. It is a fairly short film. It's like an hour 40, but it feels like there's so much packed into it. Is it an hour 40? It doesn't say here. But it's a lot packed into its running time. And it has a lot of energetic camera moves that... This was ahead of MTV. This is before MTV was coming. This was like 82, 83. And this was these quick cuts that were going on that then suddenly we're seeing a lot of music videos and then a lot of films like from like Highlander and things. I mean, Highlander owes a lot to this film. And lots of films that were very fast cutting owe a lot to this film. I'm pretty sure Michael Bay's watched these kind of films a lot and try to steal their cutting technique. But it's also got an old-fashioned story. It's about these two young men who become like the kind of assistants to these two great warriors who are trying to fight this evil that's spreading throughout the land. And they're having to step up to become great warriors and from themselves because their masters slowly get corrupted by the evil they're trying to fight. And it's a hero's journey story taking place over a few days. So these characters go from being nobodies to being people who have to defend the world. So it's very Star Wars-ish like in that kind of structure. But it's very Asian as well because there's lots of old myths. There's lots of... the pacing of it is very different from the West. The West likes to give you time to breathe between setups of sequences. This one has one sequence, another sequence, another sequence, another sequence. It's like the first 40 minutes, you're not going to catch your breath at all. It's like one thing after another. You may have to take a break in this film. And even when it gets in the middle part, where it goes to a place where the narrative can stop for a bit, it still doesn't stop its pacing that much. It's just slightly slower. So it's completely insane. It's wonderfully insane. And there's lots of there's people always flying through the air. The villains are always doing these weird things and getting killed off left and right. But as soon as they get killed, they infect whoever kills them, or they infect other people, and those people become the people you have to defeat. So the good guys, some of the good guys eventually become the bad guys because they get infected by the the evil they're trying to defeat. And there's all these older gods and older myths that are slowly coming to the surface. All these areas of ancient knowledge, which are typical of like old myths and typical of the kind of myths that Star Wars took from and now influenced a lot of other films since from then. So it's an old story, but it's been redone for modern times. And it is just wonderful. It's completely insane, though. I mean, I'm just feeling tired just talking about it, just remembering watching it, because it's so completely crazy. It's really crazy. And it's one you shouldn't know that much about. I mean, I've probably said too much, but the stuff I've said is pretty much in the trailers or in the basic description you get from this film. Is like, because the basic story is two guys having to learn how to become warriors once the people who meant to train them have been corrupted. That's it. That's the story. You can't really tell you what it's about without revealing that. But it's how everything happens is the important thing. And how crazy it gets, and how strange the whole thing is, and how weird it is, and it is just genuinely wonderful, but it is really exhausting. And there's lots of really great sequences in it. I mean, the first section actually takes a while to get to the point of these two people are the kind of disciples of these two masters. It takes a while even to get there, because just showing them doing all these fight scenes where they're meeting people and people get introduced. So no one just gets introduced like, hey, I'm that person. They get introduced with having a massive action scene to show off how good they are. So there's like 3 action scenes as introductions early on. That's this film's view of how to introduce a character is. We're going to have a massive action scene for them. Which obviously influenced the West quite a lot. Why have a direct line of dialogue when you can blow up a temple instead? That's the kind of motive of this film. I mean, it's so strange, but by the time we get to the end, and it's like, so the end's kind of like, wow, we've only 20 minutes left, and there's often a lot to wrap up. Because the pace is so quick, it does wrap it up. It's quite satisfying ultimately, but it's like, it's paced completely different from what you'd expect. So when you go into it, do not expect a normally paced film. It's structured in a very different way. It does pay off, but you have to throw out your Western views of pacing and comedy and everything else, and how they mix, how drama and comedy mix, because it's done for a Chinese audience and a Hong Kong audience, and then everyone else is invited, but it's not really for us. But it is wonderful. Zoo Warriors is wonderful, but do not expect something conventional. Finally, we have a trilogy of Shaw Brothers. The 88 films put out. Now, there's going to be a lot of Shaw Brothers films coming out in the next few months. They are always going to have their big Shaw Brothers box set of Volume 1, which looks epic. 88 films have released a lot of Shaw Brothers films. I bought a few of them up recently during some of the sales. There seems to be a lot of, there is a lot now coming out, a lot of exports coming out of some of these old films. So I've watched a few of them. I've other ones to watch. I mean, I've got the Oily Man, whatever you call him, the exploitation movie. I have not watched it yet. But I did watch the 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, the Inframan, and the Vengeful Beauty, which was my favourite of the 3, even though it's not as well received as the 8 Diagram Pole Fighter. This is probably the one that is the best known and the best respected. And honestly, if I was judging it just by how well it's done, it is the best of the 3 films. I just like Vengeful Beauty more. But that's me. But this one is about a guy whose all his brothers are killed during a big epic fight that starts the film off. And one thing I found in the old-fashioned ones is the leadership of anywhere is corrupt, and the hero is going to find his family and friends betrayed by the corruption at the top, and they have various lackeys, so he has to get revenge against all these people who destroyed him in the first place. It just suggests that China was a very corrupt system in the past, but it's really it falls into the good guy bad guy thing of Westerns and everything else, where it's basically like, these are the villains, these are good guys, and they've a long path to get revenge on the villains for what they did. So the pole fighter, which I'm going to call pole fighter from now on, is pretty much the story of Gordon Liu, who after all his brothers are killed, he escapes and he's out for vengeance, and he's really angry. I mean, he's so angry he overacts to insane levels. Early on in the film, this is not a subtle performance, but he's very good at kung fu, so it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing that goes against this film ultimately is your lead character is a total dick for 2/3 of the movie. Really is. I found him to be really, really hard to deal with, just as a character. So that was kind of the problem. And you go back to see his family at some point, and they're getting surrounded by all of these other villains who are waiting to see if anyone else survived from the massacre. Because one of the sons survived, and he's gone mad. And they had to. The actor who played this son who went mad died in a car accident halfway through the filming, so they had to change the final third of the film to get around that. And to be honest, you never notice, because this character was meant to come back to sanity and kick ass, but instead I did do a different thing. And it still worked fine, and no one ever noticed. But it did happen. It did create this weird narrative of a character who is built up and then disappears. But it's the last third's so satisfying anyway, it doesn't really matter. And what you really get into is the lead character learning how to become a monk and learning the pole diagram fighting style that can be used against the villains who have all these techniques who fit against, because they're using a lot of poles and a lot of spears and things like that. That's the fighting technique. And the Savior and the villains have found ways around that. So by learning this Buddhist version of it, the lead character actually learns how to become a great fighter and fulfill his potential. But during that time, that's what he's in it for revenge. But during that time, he learns the Buddhist way, and he manages to influence the Buddhists as well to what the outside world needs. But he learns from them how to go beyond his own selfish needs and learn a lesson, as typical of these kind of stories is. It's done pretty well. It's not done amazingly well. It's dramatically, it's a bit hacky because this film jumps around a lot. There's so much plot in this film, dealing with betrayal in the first third, then the paranoia, and the lead character having to learn his lessons, and then finally having to learn those lessons and having to save his people and defeat the villains. There's a lot of plot to get through, and sometimes the film feels like it's too much plot for its own good. I mean, you're just wanting the action scenes, but when the action scenes appear, they're all great. They're all just wonderful action scenes. And the narrative is fine. It's just that it does, for me, it slows it down slightly. But when the action comes, the action is just awesome. The action is so terrific in this film that any kind of complaints you might have about the lead character being a bit of a dick or the narrative being a bit over plotted, as soon as you get to the action, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a very weird, because it's a heavily plotted film. It's also very episodic, and there's lots of time jumps, and none of this matters as soon as you get to fight. Because as soon as you get to fight, they put all the energy into this, and they're always trying to make it. They're always trying to. They've this attitude of, we're going to start the film with what should be an ending of any other film, and then we're going to keep topping that throughout the film. So by the time you get to the end, it's like, what the hell am I watching? This is insane. It's that kind of great action filmmaking. So none of the complaints I have really matter, because the action is just so good and so inventive and so far ahead of a lot of the Western action movies. So this one is highly recommended. You've got to see it. It's not perfect though, but if you get through the plotting, and the plot isn't that bad, it's just, you know, it could have been another draft just to get rid of some of the rough edges. Doesn't matter though, the action itself is so good. You get the feeling that the action was where their heart was at, and the other stuff was just, you know, needs to be done. Now we have Vengeful Beauty, which, as I said, was my favourite of these films. Vengeful Beauty is basically the story of this martial arts expert who, after her master has been killed, she marries into another family. Then her family there is murdered by the This guy who's the lackey of the Emperor. The Emperor wants these dodgy things done, so this guy, to get his power going, does them. She survived, but she's pregnant, and she's trying to survive the pregnancy and deal with all these people coming to get her. She runs into this guy who's also in hiding, and they join up. Plus, she runs into this other guy who wished to be in love with her, and who's also escaped from the same master, and he also has been on the road for a long time. So it's those three versus the world, and there's plot twists and there's various narrative things that happen. But unlike the Diagram Pole Fighter film, I think the narrative in this one works a lot better. It's a revenge thing. She's gonna get revenge for the guys who killed her husband, who she loved. She's pregnant, so she's limited in what she can do. But she's a smart character who's always on the lookout for betrayal. And there's also a structure of, after they've taken out a lot of the villainous guys, the main villain is going to send his offspring, so it's two sons and a daughter, and one by one they have to take them out, one by one. The lead character has to take these family members out. And then after that, you know they're going to die. It's just one of those things. But it's how they die is the fun part. And then she has to get revenge against the big villain at the end. And it's a very simple thing. It's a very simple structure. But it's very satisfying. The twists are satisfying. Because there's a twist I didn't see coming, which was quite good. And it's got some nice brutal moments, and you would never do in a Western movie. And the fight scenes actually work around the fact that she's pregnant, and they have to be inventive around that. And the whole film is this thing where the fights have stories to them that keep you invested in the fights, and the villains, even the villains who die quick, are not pushovers. They do have skill. It's just that they don't understand the fight as a fight's only worth it if you defeat someone with skill. If you defeat someone who's useless, what's the point? So even though the lead character, she's very smart, she has to use all her brains, she has to use all her techniques to defeat these villains, because they all are pretty slimy and they do have twisted motivations, and they all are very good at what they do. And the lead villain does not mind cheating at all. So this one is just terrific. This is so enjoyable. And it's only like 80 minutes long, so it cuts out all, anything that's not needed, it cuts it out. And even if you get to a scene, they think, well, why is this here? You'll find out later why it's here. Because there's some things that you think, why did you put that in? But everything gets explained. So this is a joyful film. This is so enjoyable. You know, I did not expect much from this one. I got this in a sale, and I just thought it was like one of those ones you get one, you get one free. And I got this one. This was, for me, was a free one type of thing. It's like, we'll see what it's like, and it was just wonderful. So, Vengeful Beauty, try and see. It's really good. Finally, we have The Inframan. I would say this is the weakest of the three, but it's still very enjoyable. Solitary Ronan really likes this one. It is one of those films that, if you've watched a lot of Godzilla movies in the 70s or 60s, you know the style. Or Gamera films, you know the style. It's cheesy, it's campy. It's about a guy who becomes a robot, and he's added to his body by a scientist to defeat these alien invaders that are coming down. It very much feels like a 70s Godzilla movie, but it is really enjoyable. But it's kind of like RoboCop before RoboCop. Not as good as RoboCop. There's no satire or anything. This is just a comic book film. There's no nuance to it at all. Everything is what it is. It's just a cheese fest film. But it is enjoyable. The acting is horrible. The acting is really horrible in this film. There's the plotting is pretty horrible too. There's a point where there's a double agent, and a guy gets his mind wiped and becomes the plaything of the villains, and he comes in and you're like, okay, he's obviously mind wiped. Obviously he's a villain. Why didn't you just arrest him straight away? And they never do. But it has the advantage of the villains are pretty much like the villains you'd see in a Power Rangers movie. They're all like monsters that can be beaten up. This is pretty much a Power Rangers movie. And they're led by this woman in this, with a whip and scantily clad, and she's insane, and of only motivations to defeat the world for some reason. It's so comic booky. It's so silly. But they never stop the pace. Every so often they have a scene to have someone talk, but usually it's to have a scene between the next action scene. It's like, let's have one dialogue scene before we get to the next action scene. And all the action scenes, I talked about Vengeful Beauty, where each action scene actually seems to have a purpose. This one, it's all just action scenes. They jump around and go a lot. There's times when the hero should turn into the villain. The hero should defeat the villains by turning into Inframan. And it takes forever to do it, so the lead actor can actually have some fight scenes where you see his face. It's like, why didn't you just change into this other thing just now and defeat these guys? Oh, it's just for screen time. It's just save money. There's a scene where to defeat Inframan you have to block out the sun, but then on the fight scene you don't see any evidence of that at all. It's still lit for day, and maybe I wasn't pay attention at that point, but honestly my mind wandered during the exposition scenes. It really did. The exposition scenes are boring, but the fight stuff's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's definitely the weakest of the three that I've covered from the Shaw Brothers stuff. It is ridiculous and tacky and horrible, but it does kill people off in brutal ways. I mean, people who do not deserve to die get killed horribly. Lots of films would not have the heroes like army buddies getting killed, but quite a lot of them get killed. People are lying on the ground dead all over the place in this one, even though you don't see any much blood. It's just it's somehow bloodthirsty, but you don't show blood. But people are burnt alive, and people are thrown into volcanic lava quite a lot, like en masse. By the end of it, it's like strange. It's really strange, but very enjoyable. But maybe like me, you'll find your mind wandering during any scenes where they're not fighting. And some of the special effects are really tacky looking and really cheap looking, and they obviously had like 10 pence to do them. But that's the Asian films for this week. I hope you enjoyed the mix of the classier stuff to the trashier stuff. None of them were there were no like Uzu films or anything in this one. This is more actiony, this one, but that's the mood I was in. So I'll be back with another video. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you soon.